Hey, all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Housing Market Watch for May 20th, 2025. Well, we are quickly approaching Memorial Day weekend, and I don't know about you, but I've got some fun plans for the weekend, and I think a lot of people do. So typically, this weekend is a little bit slower in the real estate world. There's certainly still showings happening, fewer listings typically towards the end of the week. So when we talk about some of the new listings, a lot of those would have been listings that have already come on the market. There's usually a little bit of a lag in listings over this holiday weekend, and then things pick back up after the holiday. A lot of that is, again, people traveling and waiting for the end of the holiday. And then you got a few more weeks until school gets out. And then you get into the more summertime market here in the Seattle area. And this is when a lot of people are traveling. And across the country, people are traveling around kids' school schedules and such. But in Seattle specifically, it's so beautiful in the summer here compared to the rest of the year. This is where people are doing a lot of the local weekend trips, 3-4 day weekend type of trips versus staying home for the weekend, which they are most likely doing more often during the school year time. And that goes for everybody. That's not just people that have kids in school. That's everybody trying to take advantage of this beautiful window in the Pacific Northwest that just happens to hit us right in the summer. So when we're looking at some of these numbers, something that we've been talking about for a while is that we are approaching a slowdown in the housing market. And I think we've been kind of going back and forth here the last couple of weeks. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Today, some of the numbers are suggesting that, at least in Snohomish County, but I think King County as well, we're starting to see things slowing down a little bit in the housing market. So we'll start off with the market watch. And then when we get a little farther into the video here, maybe a few minutes from now, we'll talk about the trend over the last week in King and Snohomish County and starting to see some of those things show up even more prominently. When we look at the market watch here, we're seeing the new listing number pop up well over 1,000 new listings in King and Snohomish County. So again, we're just seeing a lot of listings coming on the market still. Just under 1,100 new listings. Last week, 906. But the previous week, it was similar to where we're at now. So we had a little bit of a lag last week in new listings. And I bet when we look at the stats next week, we'll see a little bit of a lag because, again, it's going to be factoring in this holiday weekend. It's not factored in yet. Lots of price reductions as well. And across King and Snohomish County, 572 price reductions versus 498 the previous week. We're starting to see that not every listing is selling over asking price on average. We're starting to see that the average is actually right at or even a little bit below asking versus at or above asking across King and Snohomish County. We're seeing quite a bit of contingent purchases. I haven't talked about this as much recently, but 26 contingent purchases over the last week, 29 the previous week. Even seeing 10 or 15 is a pretty big number. So we're seeing more sellers being open to a move-up buyer, essentially, or a downsizing buyer, someone who has another property that they need to sell in order to qualify for the other purchase. And that's been a tough thing over the past few years, because if you have a property to sell and are able to buy with that contingency, you're able to utilize the capital in that house easier than you are in another scenario where you have to have those funds already on hand to make a purchase. Now, there are certain programs where you can essentially buy now and then sell later type of deals with lenders. And there are also other more creative ways to access those funds, so they're not necessarily trapped. There's things like a HELOC or a bridge loan. Some people borrow money from a friend. I mean, there are lots of different ways to access the money. Maybe even others are able to utilize some type of securities-backed line of credit. But for the average person, they have a lot of their equity and their wealth tied up in their house, and being able to access that in a more fluid way, right? Sell the house, buy the next one is just a better transaction. It doesn't happen as much when the market's really hot. So this is one evidence that things are slowing down a little bit. Same thing with the massive amount of price reductions. Again, more than half price reductions versus new listings. So we have more than 50% of the new listing total in price reductions. That's pretty substantial. And it's been that way for a few weeks here now. Pending sales still there, 967. So keeping up with the new listings almost. 838 the previous week. Sold listings, 569 in King and Snohomish County together versus 499 the previous week. We're seeing good signs, lots of buyer activity. It's not like we're getting flooded with the inventory or the amount of houses, but we're seeing more houses on the market and we're seeing things take a little longer to sell. And that's another thing we're going to see. The numbers right now are going to start to go from selling quicker to starting to see, oh, the days on market's growing a little bit, right? So we're already in that. So if you're watching this and maybe you already have your house on the market, or you've been following some listings and you're starting to notice, hey, houses aren't selling on their offer review date. That is becoming more common again. And that is more common as the market slows down. And the offer review date is great. It does allow for the buyers that are currently in the market to all come to see the house. And it is essentially a protection for the seller from just taking the first offer that comes when maybe there were multiple that would have pushed the price up. But as the summer progresses, you start to see that offer review date be removed altogether in certain cases. In other cases, you keep it on, but the multiple offer frenzy is starting to die out. And so the multiple offer scenario is going to become less likely, and you'll start to see fewer of those offer review dates if you're a buyer in the summer than you are right now. And I think we're kind of at the tail end of the benefit of having that offer review date. I'll share this too. I have 2 listings that I brought on the market last week in Everett. One was on the market previously. We took it off for a little bit and brought it back onto the market. And then the other one we put on Friday. We have an offer review date for Wednesday, and most likely we're not going to have an offer on that offer review date. We'll see. I think the house shows beautifully. I think that the neighborhood is amazing. I think the price is right there. I think the biggest thing is that we're just in this part of the year where you don't have as much of that pent up demand. Buyers have been able to, in certain neighborhoods, there were buyers waiting for a house to come available. They get that house, and now there's less of that pent up demand. And so it just takes a little bit longer for houses to sell. And then in other cases, you have neighborhoods that are more of a move up buyer neighborhood. And so I have one of my Everett listings is in a neighborhood where a lot of people live in this neighborhood for a long time. My in-laws live in this neighborhood. They've lived in this neighborhood since the house was built in the early 90s. And even the seller of this Everett house has done the same. So there are still some original owners in the neighborhood, people that have never sold. And then you have an influx of some new people, but there's just a lot less turnover in neighborhoods like this where the price points are higher for the area and you have more of a long-term type of house and neighborhood in some of these other scenarios. Now let's talk about mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are still hovering right around 7%. Mortgage News Daily says 6.99, and we use Mortgage News Daily every week in this update. It's not perfect, right? The softwares on the back end that mortgage lenders use is probably a little bit better, but for us and for our purposes, this gives us a good way of tracking the rates as they survey a lot of the main lenders. And as we look at the counties specifically, I've really enjoyed this and hopefully have too. If you have, let me know in the comments if you've been enjoying seeing King and Snohomish County's weekly multiple offer stats. I think it's good for me. I enjoy it, right? It keeps me sharp and clients ask me these types of questions off the cuff. So it's nice to know the answers, but I hope it's helpful for you that enjoy this type of data too. When we're looking at King County, okay, I mentioned earlier in the video that we're starting to see some signs of things slowing down a little bit. And we're seeing that continuing here. So we saw median sales price right around the same, just under 1,979,50. Again, that's just for the week. And I bet by the end of the month, it'll still be right around that $1 million number, which was a high in King County. If we're looking at the amount of the list price, so when you see the published list price, what's that percentage it's selling for? We got 100% was the average in King County last week and the same this week. So things are staying about the same there. But what I'm starting to notice, and this has been a few different weeks in a row now, the trend, we're seeing fewer multiple offer scenarios. So 29% of homes, and that's still a good amount, but 29% of homes experienced that multiple offer scenario in King County. Last week, it was 33%. The escalation addendum, which is where people are paying over asking price, generally, sometimes just to get to the asking price if they offered less, 17% last week, 13% this week. So again, we saw that number changed. If we look at the pendings with the financing addendum, these are the contingencies. The financing and inspection contingencies are the two main ways that buyers protect themselves. In the contract, we have 63% last week. We had 61% this week. So interesting, slightly down. But the inspection, we had 32% last week with an inspection, 38% this week with an inspection. So we saw more people protecting themselves around the house itself, the inspection versus the financing side. Not surprised, honestly, but it's interesting to see that uptake in inspection. So between all the things, fewer multiple offer scenarios, fewer escalations, which makes sense. Right in line, actually, it's the same amount. Why would you pay more if you don't need to? With the pendings with multiple offers. And then you had the pending inspections going up as well. Let's see, 6% more. So a little bit more actually than the amount or the decrease in the multiple offer scenarios. And Snohomish County is going to be a little bit more pronounced. So home prices in Snohomish County are always less. We saw 826, 747 as the median sales price in Snohomish County. Last week, we were at 901, 250. So a little bit of a drop off there. We'll chalk that up to just timing, but we'll see kind of where everything lands at the end of the month. What's interesting though, and this is what I was starting to point out at the beginning, for the last week, homes have sold below asking price on average, 99% of the list price. Last week, we were at 100. So things are, again, they've been trending downwards over the past few weeks. Now, as of last week, we saw houses selling below asking price on average. In fact, one of my clients in Snohomish County this week got their offer accepted for below asking price, and they got an inspection. And that's something that we were talking about earlier in the video, and we're seeing that same trend across the county. So we saw fewer multiple offer scenarios, more drastic in Snohomish County, 37% last week, 26% this week. Huge drop off, more than 10%, 11%. Pendings with escalation addendums, there were 15% last week, 10% this week. A little bit of a drop off there. Not as dramatic, but still 33% drop off. We saw more financing addendums, 76% of all offers versus 69% of all offers. And the inspections, again, this jumped to 12%. 31% of offers had inspections last week, 43% this week. So again, one of my buyers was able to benefit from the market slowing down a little bit, got the house below asking price, and also including that inspection addendum. And so for buyers, I've been sharing this for a while. We're about to hit this period where it's actually better to be a buyer than it was earlier in the year. It would have been great if interest rates were lower right now than they are at the 7% mark. But this is when you're going to start to see houses selling at or below asking price, and there are a lot more options to choose from. So if I was a buyer, in fact, I think, the last house I bought was in the summer. Right? House sat for 30, 40 days. I liked it, but I wasn't going to buy it for the list price. They dropped the price. I still didn't buy it for the list price. I got it below the list price. And that was a couple years ago. But that happens in the summer regularly, where people are, when the inventory is low, bidding the prices up. And then as the market starts to slow down and level off, nobody wants to pay that price anymore. That was the competition driving the price up. And then you start to see the prices kind of settle into where the general market value is. So I think this is that window of opportunity for buyers coming up. So if you have questions, if you're a buyer, happy to have conversations and answer some of those questions, even if you want to drop them in the chat. And if you're somebody that's thinking about selling, I think just adjusting expectations. We're getting out of and coming out of this season of the year where, there's some multiple offers and things are selling super quick. And we're entering into a time where it might take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to sell your house. It might even take a little bit longer, and there might be a price reduction coming. Thanks so much for watching this week's Seattle Housing Market Watch. If you got some value out of this video, please consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this. And if you know somebody who could benefit from this video, please consider sharing it with them.